Okay, hi everyone. We are live now, which is quite amazing. Just give me a second to clean up some technical problems I have so I can go live everywhere. And that should be it. So, well, we have quite a surprise here. We are live, and it was a big surprise because this was a struggle of 60 hours. We promised we would be back, and I thought we would be back on David's birthday, but it took a bit longer, right? So I think it's been about 60 hours. This is just a small replay, so you can see that. That just happened a few minutes ago. And that's E16 there. That's E16. So I hope I'm going to see all of you. Hi to all of you on Periscope. I'm just watching that. Give me a second. Let's go to, I just have to go to Facebook and make sure we are there. 1 second. See if we're live everywhere. I don't know. Yes, we are. Oh, fantastic. We're live there too. Wonderful. That worked. Hi, everybody on Facebook and also on YouTube. Let me just switch over to YouTube. Now I've got it all. Wonderful. So I see all my friends there also on YouTube. Very nice. And thanks especially to Lady Hawk, who has constantly been feeding me information and updates. So I really welcome that. Anyway, David Hancock is back, which is really wonderful. Hi, David.
Hello, how are you? I know what you've just been going through because I've been watching you.
David is a year older now, or a year younger, whatever you want to say. So, anyway, David, let's get right to the point. I mean, your prediction was incredibly good today. I'm really amazed at David's capabilities here to predict it. He was looking at it a few hours, and he said, give it a few more hours. David, can you tell us a lot about what you observed? What was unusual here about this hatch?
Well, I mean, in the first place, this is a kind of a marvelous thing because this is a total replacement clutch. The first two eggs, or egg and a chick, both died, and then nearly 60 days later, the pair has produced another pair of eggs. And after their 36 days or whatever it was, is precisely, I'm not quite sure, it's just about that, they've now both hatched. And the worry was a couple of days ago when the first chick hatched, there was a visual of the second egg being pipped, and it had a big hole at the pipping, not just a little kind of a 1/4 inch hole. It had almost 3/4 of an inch or an inch across, and within a few hours the actual wing extended out the hole. And there was a valid concern because hatching is a really, really important and crucial few hours of the chick's first life. And let me just review a couple of these things. I mean, the first thing the chick does when it's in its cement womb, it's inside a membrane inside the cement casing. And the first thing it does is peck a hole through the membrane so its beak reaches into the air sac, which is about a 3/4 of an inch deep air sac at the top of the egg. And it kind of gets its first small breath out of that air sac. With that bit of air now in its lungs, it starts to work very hard and create a hole now through the outside calcareous shell. And then it breaks through so that the beak, the little egg tooth that's done this etching and carving and weakening of the shell, it breaks through to the outside and meets the oxygen, the air on the outside. And all of a sudden now the chick gets full energy because it gets to breathe in proper oxygen, and it gets a lot of energy from that. Now, there's a bit of a hiatus, a rest after it breaks through. It has a bit of breathing. Then it starts basically a 3-day workaround. It actually has to rotate its entire body, including the head, inside the egg membrane. And as it's working its way around, it has that little egg tooth that we've seen on the top of the beak. and it scratches the egg all the way around from the inside and weakens that egg. And it's at that weakened point that the egg then breaks, cracks, and the top falls off. Now, what happened in this?
David, by the way, you had a wonderful, I'm sorry to interrupt, you had a wonderful way, you called it a cement tomb. I love that expression, so just elaborate on that.
Well, it goes from being its womb, where it's raised, and it's very close in that last few hours to being, whether that womb becomes an opening to the wild or whether it becomes a tomb. Because once that chick breaks that shell and air now meets the membrane that's holding the chick inside, there's a great danger that that membrane will dry out and it'll stick and hold part of the chick to the eggshell, and therefore the chick can't move it, whether it can't move part of its head because some of the feathers are just embedded in the as the loose membrane is actually being hardened by the air. Sometimes some of the little feathers get locked in there, and then the bird can't move its head properly, and that's a tragedy. The bird just simply dies. And there was a worry here, and some of the people apparently addressed this, that when there was that fairly big opening, where it had pipped, it was maybe 3/4 of an inch across, a lot of air is hitting that, and there was the worry that this is already a late hatch, in the sense that 60 days after the first eggs hatch. It's warmer now in Florida than it was 60 days ago, generally speaking. And if the air with that warm air and it dries out, that's where the danger of this of the few feathers being sort of glued to the side of the shell. And there was a worry that with mom standing up and looking after the other chick, that the air could dry out this membrane and cause the shell to stick to the feathers. But the bird was pretty vigorous, and I could see she was also trying to cover it up. And as we were having this first little discussion a few hours back, it was pretty obvious. Mom was, I don't want to say she's understands these things, but she understands these things. There's just absolutely no doubt about it. And she was covering up the chick, because what is happening in doing that? She's covering it up and keeping the fresh air, the breeze, from blowing against the shell membrane and drying out that membrane. And she was enabling also, while she's sitting tight over it, to build up the relative humidity next to her body, next to the egg, and in that eggshell. And it's that relative humidity, if it gets too dry, then that's what sticks the feathers to the eggshell. But she was doing all the right things, and I said, no, I wouldn't give up on her, because some people were really worried. I said, no, I think she's going to manage it. And a few hours later, she managed to pull this out. The little chick pulled it off. I mean, she pulled it off by giving the right microenvironment, but the little chick then finished the cut around the rest of the shell, and then the shell broke properly, and out he came, and it's quite wondrous. I mean, every one of these things is just an absolutely marvelous happening. The getting out of this cement womb of eggs or birds or reptiles or dinosaurs. Dinosaurs had the same challenge. They had to get out of eggs as well. So this whole group of creatures, birds, reptiles, dinosaurs, have had 150 million years of practicing this. So this is not without experience and tried and true methods. And birds today are the epitome of how to adapt to this. So I think we had confidence in her, and she pulled the eggs of the chicks, and she pulled this whole thing off properly. So I'm quite pleased. it gives you one faith in evolution.
Yeah, by the way, everywhere on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, please put in your questions. This is the big opportunity because, I mean, I was watching the Southwest Florida Eagle Nest discussion today. It was completely full of 2,000, and there were so many questions. And I mean, so if you have any questions, here's your chance. I mean, here's David Hancock, an Eagle biologist who's done this for decades. I nearly said centuries.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you.
But it's just amazing, a wealth of experience. But let's say you've been doing this for a few years and you have centuries of experience. How's that, right? Okay.
Well, the one thing I have had a lot of experience with, I've raised a lot of birds. And at one point, not that many years ago, 25, 30 years, I used to have 27 incubators running here at the same time. Many of them were small incubators, and I was doing tests in them. So I was checking out how different types of bird, game birds, waterfowl, grouse, raptors, how they all developed in the shell and how they got out of that cement womb, because it is a pretty wondrous thing when you think about it. So,
yeah, David, there's a good question here on someone by Periscope saying, why isn't she feeding the newborn chick? That's a great question. So here you go.
Yeah, well, we kind of dealt with this the last time, but I know it's a constantly point of questioning for many people. When chicks come out of the egg, they may not eat at all for 1 or 2 and occasionally for 3 days. And the reason is the last function of the chick breaking through the egg and hatching, there's the other function happening not at the beak end, but at the backside end, which is where the umbilical cord, the tube that connects the developing embryo to its egg sac, the yolk. Now, the chick has developed between the absorption and use of the albumin, the white egg part of the egg, and all that high energy that's contained in the yolk. And at the very last, the last thing before hatching, the bird has to reabsorb that yolk backwards into the body, because you see the yolk was on the outside of the body to start with, and it was being absorbed in through blood vessels into the body. Now, before hatching, you can't be dragging through a piece of sticky nest with sticks in it. You can't be dragging a delicate yolk membrane. You re-suck in backwards, in a sense, the yolk into the gut cavity. And
yeah, well, you know, Lady Hawk was just saying, thanks, Lady Hawk, anyway, for all the incredible information you're feeding. I have 3 iPhones here, by the way, to get all your messages. Well, I can see directly here from Lady Hawk, so thanks again for that. And she just sent me, E16 got a bite of fish, and she sent me a screenshot, which I can't show you at the moment, but it's evident, so it has been started, it has started to feed, actually.
We saw it a few minutes ago when you were
you saw it?
It up. I saw it already. Okay. So it depends. Some chicks, when they actually get out, have already reabsorbed all the yolk sac into the gut cavity. And then the second part is they have to absorb the yolk from being in the gut cavity into the body, because they don't want, the gut doesn't want to be full of egg yolk. It wants to be empty and making the bird feel hungry. And I saw this bird already take some food. So that was kind of interesting. That means it had not just reabsorbed the egg yolk, but had absorbed the egg yolk from inside the gut cavity into the blood system and utilized it as an energy source. So this bird is well on its way. It's already accepting food, which is quite remarkable. I mean, they don't always do it that quickly.
Yeah, I got some very interesting question here. This is from, sorry if I missed them. I'm doing my best to read 3 screens, okay, and run the broadcast. So I'm really trying my best. So Sparkle Eagle Jill says, Zasavo to David, why do you think they don't help remove the shell to assist the chick, especially when it may be struggling or stuck? Great question. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is something you see throughout most of the animal kingdom.
Mhm.
Even most mammals, the most they do is lick off some of the embryonic sac. Uh, Most birds don't do anything, and when you watch them at the time, you feel, oh my God, you got to help, but they just don't. The chick, and I guess this is a part of evolution. If the
Mhm.
chick has got it all right, it's got the right amount of energy, it will fight its way out of that egg properly, and then it has the likelihood of being able to effectively survive. If it has to be mollycoddled, it doesn't usually work. And when we in aviculture end up trying to get eggs to hatch that
Mhm.
didn't want to hatch properly, they usually ultimately are inferior birds. They don't usually mature properly. There's something usually wrong with them.
Yeah.
So
By the
nature
way,
has
yeah.
learned
Okay.
this on its own. If
Mhm.
it doesn't do hatch naturally, it probably isn't going to make the grade, and best to let it die quickly.
Yeah, a question from Amanda. Hi, nice Amanda to see you. Sorry, I'm a little bit late at this. I'm scrolling back through the questions here. She says, question for David. I know these late blooming eaglets are first at this nest. How many have you seen of that? So it's the second clutch. How often have you seen that? Good
Well,
question.
personally, on eagles, I've not seen it. I've seen it regularly. I'm hoping our I haven't bred cranes for a couple of years because I went out of crane breeding. Now I'm going back into crane breeding, and I always would pull two broods or sometimes three broods out of cranes, and so it's pretty regular in
Mhm.
aviculture to do this. And this is why we have California condors today. It's why we have a huge flock now of wild whooping cranes and many other rare birds. It's because we've learned, aviculturists have learned how to breed these birds and get them to recycle and get each generation to relive. I mean, to live again or to live additionally, so that you can pull two and three clutches out of one bird. And this is commonly done to breed up populations of rare birds.
Yeah, and you were mentioning last time, I can remember that you said because of the weather, of course, in Florida, it's more likely to have a second clutch, and we went through the paper, in fact, right? So,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, weather is one issue. Weather is particularly an issue when you think of it. We're up here, Christian, in Canada, and,
Hmm.
and our nesting season is still moderately long. There have been birds that have recycled, but this bird did a kind of recycling a bit unusual. It it didn't lose its eggs. It went through the full 36 days of hatching its eggs, and it raised one chick for several weeks before it died, and then the bird recycled. That's what was unusual about this particular sequence. The bird had gone 60, had hatched a chick,
Hmm.
raised it for some weeks, then had to recycle. Most birds would not do that. They wouldn't
Right.
have time to do that here. You couldn't have 60-day later chicks, well, at least not much farther north from here. It would be freezing up already, and the lakes would have frozen over, and there'd be no food available. So some birds just simply couldn't do this. And in Florida, I said the one thing, but it's only part of the equation. It may not freeze up down there, but it might get too hot. Or it might be that the fish move out of the shallow waters to deeper waters to keep cool. I mean, there may be a whole bunch of other biological reasons that food is not going to be available. It doesn't have to just be frozen under ice like we would have in northern Canada. So there's lots of reasons why nature times its things, sometimes quite precisely.
Yes, I think that channel is overloaded. I'm just trying to let me just 1 second. There's so much activity on it. Just give me a chance. Get it back running now. Oh yeah. Okay, so that's the nighttime now. So this is the real-time view. What I was doing before was just going back a bit. So this is fantastic. So obviously what we call the infrared or well, as a scientist call it far red light is now illuminating them. So the eagles are not irritated by this because they can't see the light. But this is live now. So that's
it's
a live
already
view.
dark. It's already
Yes.
dark there.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. I
Wow,
mean,
wow.
we're seeing it black and white, so it's already dark. But this is really a live view now as we come. So this is absolutely marvelous. You can see E15 in front and E16 in the back, doing incredibly well, right? So David,
Yeah.
what is the next challenge for this little chick E16 to survive the next days?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's two or three categories of potential problems. I mean, the first of what built into the chick, in terms of, is it genetically well established? And the second thing, is it nutritionally well established? Does it already carry a load of pesticides or poisons that are potentially going to weaken it? And the next category, the kind of third category of concerns, is the ecosystem around it, the temperature, the bright, hot sun. Is this going to be overwhelming this late in the season, and will the parents be able to give it adequate shade to keep it cool enough? And then the final thing is, and we kind of touched on this first, does the habitat in Florida continue to generate food? Like up here,
Yes.
it could be frozen under the ice. Maybe it goes down deep and they don't have it available. I don't know that. I don't.
Yeah,
know
that was Karen's question actually on Facebook. Exactly that. Do you think Harriet, so the female, and M15 will find good sources of food in the heat? They should fledge by July, and their appetites will be ferocious. Will there be fish available since the fish may be swimming lower in the pond? Thank you. Well,
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, I was quite involved for years in aviculture in Texas and Louisiana and so on. And they trapped 9 eagles down there in Morgan City, Louisiana, where they have the big Eagle Festival every year. And one of the interesting things about the 9 birds they trapped, which was at Christmas time, like December, come June, all the juvenile birds that were then like 8-9 months old, and all the adults that they banded, all had migrated at the end of June and had crossed the Canadian border into parts of southern and central Canada. So what that said to me is, those birds had learned historically that there's more food available when they're not.
By the way, just look at the beautiful picture now. You see that? That's, I don't know which one. Some of you can help. Which one is Harriet? Which one is M15? But it's just a marvelous picture with both parents. Sorry, then. Yeah.
Is feeding the chick. She's taking the food from the dad and offering it to the kids.
Yeah. Sorry. Go on, David. Sorry, I just had to quickly say that. So go on.
Yeah, that's fine. So the point is, there could well be a food source available, but when I saw the fact that the other Texas and Louisiana birds were leaving the area, that kind of suggests they've left by June because there's more food likely somewhere else. They don't need to stay there for breeding, and they came all the way up to Canada to get food. So there may well be historically might be the cue, more food available in the north late in the summer than in the south. But this looks, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I have no idea. Maybe some of these birds stay there in and around this nest site. I don't know that. Somebody who's watching it will know whether these birds stay at the nest site and find lots of food all the time, or whether they don't, or whether they're like many of the other southern birds. They actually migrate north because it's obviously better food farther north.
I mean, maybe a question just about because I also saw a statement again from Lady Hawk remarking how amazing the female here is, Harriet, who's been at the nest since, I think, what was it, 2006, and she's estimated to be over 25 years old. So maybe that experience does help, right? So
no, not maybe. It undoubtedly helps. No, undoubtedly it helps. It's an important part about it. That's why these birds are long lived. It enables them to have a chance to
To
finally figure out how to produce young. Because I mean, technically, they only need to produce 2 young to maturity to replace them. Now they've produced 2 young for almost 15 years, so they're doing pretty good.
Yeah, we're getting. By the way, thank you for all your messages. They're very so kind. I just wanted to say, in our extremely difficult times in my lifetime, this is probably the most bizarre and extreme time that we're living through. This is an absolute blessing. It's an absolute blessing to have this. I mean, what more can we have where we're all sitting quarantined? The webcams here are the best escape we could possibly imagine. It's almost a miracle, isn't it, David?
It is. I mean, we who are interested in birds like this can go out in the day. I mean, a couple of days ago, I went out and I went to
Yes.
38 nests in the day. And the day or two before that, I went to 32 nests, checking their success. And what a wonderful thing. I didn't talk to a single other living individual. I didn't subject myself to any risk of contact with people. I never came anywhere. I never even saw a living soul. And I went to that many nests in the town. It was amazing. And if I have had one positive experience from this whole corona thing, and most of the experiences are pretty negative,
Yeah, sure,
but
sure.
one positive thing is the American citizens and the people of the world generally have caught on to the significance of this distancing. Some of the
Right.
politicians haven't, but the
hmm
population
Population.
generally understands what's going on. You just wish the bloody politicians could catch on as much as the people have caught on.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
and everybody's actually remarking on this. What a miracle it is, and it's I mean, David, you had. I mean, you usually, and I have to really praise David. I'm a big fan of David, as you probably know. Well, what is exceptional about David is just his incredible insight into the behavior, because he looks at things and he doesn't get so influenced what others think. He completely thinks for himself. And that's what I find so remarkable. I always have to think of this incredible story. Maybe, David, you can quickly tell it whilst we're watching these beautiful pictures, which I really love. Is the reason why there would be an eagle nest in Swarson, which is where the ferry terminal is, surrounded by surrounded by herons. I thought your interpretation was magnificent, because I think our Fish and Wildlife got it wrong, and you
Well,
interpreted it correctly. Or was
no,
it like that?
well, it took a while for the people to catch on, everybody, myself included, but it became pretty apparent.
Well, you could first tell them what it is about. Yes,
So
yes.
I'll tell them what it's about. There's a couple of fairly big predators in our area. One is bald eagles, and the other are great blue herons. And you have the same two there in Florida. In fact, the two birds are over most of North America where there is good water supply. Both these birds, herons, great blue heron, and the eagle, eat part of the same food source, small fishes. Now, when not that long ago, in my time, unfortunately, Americans offered a bounty on eagles, and they used to pay people $2 to shoot and kill bald eagles, and they'd cut the legs off and they could turn them in Alaska. Well, what was a problem for even here in Canada was that most of the Alaska fishermen live in Washington State, which is on the other side of us here. In my case, it's 5 feet away because I'm that close to Washington. And what happened was, because of this bounty, Americans literally shot out all the eagles in the Fraser Valley, right where I live. Also, because predators, which were built up to be bad, it didn't matter what they were, whether it was coyotes or wolves or bears or owls or seals or orcas, it didn't matter what. We were against them all because we looked at them all as competitors. Well, we shot off most of the herons, and we shot off most of the eagles.
Wow.
But the herons moved in more quickly to the Fraser Valley and into many areas. But that was shortly followed by the world in the 60s changing its attitude to eagles. And the big birds of prey, which of course the herons benefited as well, but the eagles in particularly were deemed a wonderful asset. The orcas, which had been despised by so many people, were also, the killer whale was considered all of a sudden to be a good asset. Well, as the herons came back into the city, it took a little longer for the eagles to move back. And in the meantime, herons nested 3, 4 nests, 5 nests, then it was 10 nests, in many little clumps of trees throughout our Fraser Valley and the islands. Then as the eagles moved in, there became a threat to also the herons. The eagles would take young herons out of nests. Well, a new balance was soon struck. It's all happened in my lifetime. And what happened was the herons learned that if they were only 2 or 3 pairs of herons in a heronry, or 10 or even 20 pairs, an eagle could come in and keep taking every day, take another chick, and so on. And so the herons learned that their safety was based on going in big colonies, or at least nesting close to an eagle's nest, and having a lot of herons nesting right beside and within 10 and 20 and 30 feet of eagle nests. And what happened was, going from hundreds of little tiny colonies of herons, we went to 4 huge heronries, where there was 250, 300, 400, and I think 36 pairs in the biggest heronry. And every one of these heronries was situated right beside and tightly around an eagle's nest. If the eagle nest moved up 100 yards, the heronry moved up 100 yards and continued to cluster around this eagle nest. And fortunately, one of the people that's involved in our tracking study, Dr. Ron Eidenberg, put a student on this, and that student showed that, sure, the one pair of eagles still ate a few herons, but that colony produced like 1,300 herons, the one that was around
Isn't that
the
clever?
nest,
Isn't it?
and it only lost 32 herons, if I remember correctly, to the eagles. And the reason they only lost so few, and the herons obviously understood this, was that the eagles are territorial, and they defend their eagle nest from other eagles. And so the more herons that nested tightly around the one eagle nest, they got protection from that territorial pair of owners of that eagle nest. So the only thing they had to worry about was the little few herons they lost to that pair. The eagles kept all the other eagles, the territorial eagles kept all the other eagles away. So it turns out that the herons seem to understand this so effectively. And today we even have still basically 4 big heronries in the Lower Mainland, although there is another one starting up. It's now, we're going to go out and try and do a count on it next week, but I think there's 22 pairs this year on another heronry. So there may be going to be another fairly big, this one will only probably hold a couple of hundred. There's not many trees. But it's kind of fascinating, this relationship between 2 birds partly eating the same food and how they managed to make a balance in the environment. There's a lot of herons today. There's no lack of herons. There's a lot of herons. And of course, we have a lot of eagles as well. So they both learned how to live together. It's a rather good symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I'm just pulling back a little bit for those of you who are saying, asking what we're looking at here. I see some of the questions here. So this is the Southwest Florida nest, the famous one that exists since 2006, I think, or maybe, I don't know, around 2006. And this has been the replacement clutch. That's what is so remarkable. And both chicks seem to have made it. Well, I mean, this is just a few hours ago, but it's an absolute blessing here. So I'm here with Eagle Biologist David Hancock here, actually near Vancouver in Canada. And we're watching it from here. And by the way, David was, we talked about this last time, was one of the big, also one of the initiators of cameras for eagle nests in Canada. So he's got a lot of history there.
We pioneered the eagle cameras in the world.
Well, there you go. There.
Yeah.
So it was. So we talked to. If you missed that, you can listen to the last live stream we have. It's also on Facebook and on Periscope. Just listen to that, and he tells the whole story. But anyway, this is just interesting how you dance with the devil here, right? So the herons are dancing with the eagle, and dancing in a fine balance. Isn't it just remarkable, right? So that's a wonderful story. I'm just looking on Facebook. Just Sophia, I thought you had a question, but you didn't, I think. So if you have any question,
I have another comment.
Yeah, go. Sure. Mm-hmm.
There's so much controversy about conservation, and conservation means wise use of the resource. It doesn't mean no use. It means wise use of the resource.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
That's the really important understanding. Now, what I have lived through, I just was 82 yesterday, so I've lived quite a few years. I had my first eagle at the age 14. So I've had eagles. I've been involved with them intimately for a long time, and I've raised lots of cougars and bears and so on. So I've always been involved with predators. One of the fascinating things is that most humans around the world, for a certain period of time, rejected predators, whether I mentioned earlier, whether it was a wolf or a fox or a bear or eagles or whatever. One of the big things that fitted into that category of bad predators were orcas, mm-hmm. the killer whale. And in one of the first scientific expeditions that I went out to live on a remote bird colony many years ago, it was about 1964 or 5, I think it was 4, with my wife. We were going out there to live for a month to study the eagles that lived on this little rock with 7 million seabirds. And a Canadian research vessel was taking us out there to live there. And as we were going out from Tofino on the west coast of Vancouver Island, we barely got out into the open ocean, and somebody yells, "Oh, killer whales!" off to the starboard. A guy comes running down there.
That's a horrible story.
Well, but I want to tell it because it's very
positive. Go ahead, sure.
This part is not positive. But he ran down into the hold of the ship, brought up a machine gun, and this is the Canadian research vessel, and he mounts the machine gun on the bow, and he lets go about 70, 80 shots into this herd of orcas. Now, that just epitomizes, it's a few years after America took the bounty off the eagles, but people were still shooting orcas because they were a predator. So the positive part of this story, and it's so intense part of my life, is that we humans are the ones that determine what happens to the world. Mm-hmm. And we're the ones that set the path of how others follow us. And at that time, there was this great change in the 60s, but particularly through the 70s, due to Rachel Carson, the lady who pioneered all this. She helped set the trigger, and then thousands of other people worked at helping the message. Changed this attitude from predators being bad to predators being a necessary part of the ecosystem. The ecosystems don't function if their predators are missing. The fish populations of the world don't work properly if they don't have sharks, and the seals and the so on don't work if they don't have orcas. And
yes, exactly. And salmon, of course. Salmon, oh goodness me.
Well, it's the same thing. And so the point is, we have done incredibly well in recognizing some of our own fallacies and how we did things wrong. It's just that we haven't quite yet recognized how to overcome some of these greed-driven nonsense that we get into it. We over-harvest so many things. We have to learn how to bring that harvest back into a reasonable shape so that all the different species get to live together. Then we'll be able to live together. If they don't live together, we can't live here either.
That's completely correct. Okay, I'm going to find some more questions here on Facebook. Mandy, thank you very much. Will their development, so she's talking about this development here, be slower or changed because it's a second clutch, for the competition? I think you remarked something last time, but I think it's important to just reiterate that.
No, the development is likely every bit the same. It provided the food is there in the environment at this time of year, and I suspect it will be. They will get the same amount of care and attention. Will there be challenges because it's a bit too hot? Will that be stressful on the chicks or the mother? Time will tell. Obviously, the fact that most Florida birds nest in December, and our birds are nesting now. Like we've got I've got 450 eagle nests in the Fraser Valley near me, and they've all got eggs now, except about maybe 5%. One of our camera nests is not yet laying, but it never lays until April, and they're just about to. But most of them are just starting to hatch, just like this one. This bird being 60 days later is actually now at the same time as ours are. It's amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me find some more. I see so many points here, some good ones. Let me just see. Oh gosh, I wish I had ability to mark the questions. 1 second. Just give me a second. Oh yes, Donna. Any thoughts as to why these hatches seem to take so much longer than normal? So she's
Well, I don't know that.
I don't know that. Yes, exactly. You don't know that. I don't know if it's true. Maybe someone, maybe Donna, you know a lot about the development in Florida. You know how quickly they hatch, or maybe it's not the case. So I don't know. Maybe somebody else can comment on this, right?
Well, I can mention one thing because
Yes.
in the book I wrote on eagles a long time ago, I said they basically hatched in 35 days, and they often did. But now we're seeing, when we're looking at them intimately with cameras in the nest, it's usually 36 and occasionally 37th day when they hatch. So
Right.
maybe we thought it was 35 days from watching the female. What we were always basically doing was looking up at them from the nest, watching them, and you think they'd hatch by their change in behavior between the parent and the developing chicks. Well, what happened now? We see it happening a little bit more clearly with the cameras. As the chick begins to hatch and start to get the pip gets fairly big, the parent doesn't sit so heavily on the egg because the egg is no longer quite so solid. It's
Right.
breaking open. And so the parent sits up at a bit of an angle, props its body up at a bit. That enables the egg to be kind of protected in a airspace. And so the normal distinction between an incubating bird, one sitting on a baby chick, and one sitting on an egg, was the egg sitter, his body is totally horizontal, where the one sitting on a chick sits with his body up a bit of an angle, so that it gives protection to the chick that it can move around. And so maybe what we're seeing here is, now that we're seeing all these birds hatch on cameras, and we get to see precisely what day they come out of the egg, we're seeing that maybe what we thought was the bird sitting up a bit and thinking there was a chick there, really what there isn't, there's a hatchling chick. It's beginning to hatch. And so we made it a day earlier. That's one explanation of why we used to think it was only 35 days, where now it's maybe 36 to 37.
By the way, David, I do see some. Hi, Melody. Very nice to have you here on Facebook. She writes E9, so this is E9, of course, talking about this nest, was the longest at 41 hours. E16 was longer. Not sure exactly how long. Yeah, but this was over 55 hours. Thus the question. So I think it's probably a valid remark, right? So,
Well,
yeah,
I'm not quite sure what they're meaning by hours. I mean, we're talking about two things here, I think.
yeah,
The hatch date is the number of days between when the female sits
right.
on the egg and brings the
That's
egg's
correct. Yes.
temperature
Hmm.
up to the temperature
Hmm.
that about 100 degrees when it starts
Right. Hmm.
to the cells divide,
Hmm.
and then when it breaks out of the shell. Maybe if she's
Mm.
speaking hours, she's speaking of the time from when
That's
the
what she
pip
means.
happened
That's what it is.
to
Yes.
when it breaks
Correct.
open.
Correct.
And what we didn't discuss this
Hmm.
because it wasn't really yet something I've been able to see intimately. But I suspect when I saw this chick after we started to talk here today, that the chick is so energetic, the new one, that it's possible when we didn't see it go all the way around the shell, which is part of the 3-day effort. Maybe it went around the shell on the inside but didn't break the outside. So it was weakening the shell, but we didn't see it. And we only saw this fairly much bigger hole. So that when it finally broke loose,
Hmm.
it literally popped off where it had
Yes.
already circled and weakened the shell. And that's maybe why this bird came out more quickly, or some come out more quickly than others, because it takes about 3 days from the first time it gets air to when it pops out of the shell. That's pretty consistent, about 3 days. I mean,
Okay.
it's 12 hours or so, but I mean, it's basically 3 days.
Yeah. By the way, someone's saying, "Have you lost audio? Can you just give me a quick remark?" I wouldn't know that we've lost audio. If that is the case, just let me know because from my side it still seems to be working. So just tell
I
me
mean,
if
from
you
my side, I can hear you
Yeah, you
perfectly
can
well.
hear me, but you know this audio is always the most difficult one. It's just a quick remark. So if there is no audio, please let me know, and I will try and correct it immediately. Anyway, so we just spooled back a little bit. I think by this time it is really probably dark in Florida. So audio is good. Okay, no, audio is good. Okay, they can hear us. Thank you very much. I just saw Tim here, so the audio is good. That's good to know. Well, anyway, I'm just going to check if there are any more questions. No, they can hear us. Okay, it's very clear. Thank you very much. Is there anything else to mention, David? I'm just wondering.
Well, you can see. I mean,
Mhm.
what's also kind of
Yeah.
fascinating to watch is how a mother, pardon me, feeding them. It's such small pieces of food. I mean, they've got that great big beak, but she's giving them tiny little pieces,
Hmm.
sometimes only an eighth of an inch across, sometimes a quarter of an inch. She's getting the newborn chick's system to accept a little bit of food,
Right.
and it begins to pass something down the gullet, followed by a bit more. And pretty soon,
Hmm.
as people who watch these things know, boy, it's not long before they're wolfing and hawking down great bolts of food. But it starts out very, very delicate because mom knows that the system has to has to develop all of the proper gut system and get it flowing and get flowing more heavily and so on. It has to be done gradually, and the parents know these things. It's quite wonderful.
Well, it's so wonderful. I'm the only one who can read all the comments. Well, I'm not reading them all. I'm just seeing how they flood in, and the joy and excitement is so exhilarating. I think it's also just a sign of our times. It's a type of unity through animals that we are having here, through eagles, through wildlife. It's an appreciation. It's just so wonderful.
Well,
You know.
it's more
So.
than that. These cameras
Hmm.
give people just such an incredibly intimate look at
Hmm.
something we never even thought of when I was a young biologist. We never thought this was possible. And I mean, I'm never failed to be excited about watching this. This is incredible.
Yeah, David, maybe two that gives me two questions. One that actually comes from I don't remember where, but I saw it. Talk a bit about sibling rivalry and also what you've learned about food sources. Some misconceptions you had before, or not you, but that some biologists had before the cameras came. You know, those two questions. Yeah.
Well, the sibling rivalry
Mm.
Exactly that. These are two siblings from the same hatch,
Mm.
and there often develops rivalry in some species. It happens regularly in predators. It happens in the cranes that I read. Almost no cranes ever raise two young. They always lay two eggs, but one would kill the other. Now,
Wow.
yes, and in this case, it was often they would lay 2 or 3 eggs, and some owls will lay 8 or 10 eggs. And if it's a year of great food abundance, they might raise 7 or 8 of their baby chicks, and the eagles might raise their 2 or 3. But if food is on a cycle of being very low,
Sparse, yeah.
they might not do very well in raising them. They might not raise any. There might just not be enough food. But in the years of abundance of food, then they make up for it and produce more chicks. So that sibling rivalry is this reflection of which is doing. If everything is going well, then the rivalry doesn't amount in any death, but sometimes it does. The other thing is about
What you've learned, yes.
what
Mm.
people perceive
Mm.
as to what they think they believe that the birds eat. When we started to see these cameras and we realized that these eagles, at least our eagles here, and what it amounts to is every eagle is incredibly adaptable. And so we never used to think that our eagles ate voles and mice until we started to have cameras around farm fields. And when the farm hay is harvested, the eagles are coming down behind the tractors, and those voles and so on that used to run along underneath the 4 feet of grass all of a sudden find out, my goodness, we're open to the sky, and in comes an eagle and grabs them. And we see the young voles or the adult vole coming back to the nest as a food source. So these birds are much more adaptable and opportunistic than we used to think. Well, some of my friends at the university here, the um, waterfowl biologists, they still, some of them still think, but most of them now recognize that we have 2 different populations of eagles here. So, we have our breeding eagles, which like you're having right there. And then we have wintering eagles that come from the north and the Arctic. And we get 30,000 wintering eagles here that had nothing to do with our breeding birds. Totally different population. But they used to think that, all our breeding eagles here may be a threat to some of the molting waterfowl. In all the years that we've been holding these cameras, and we've got 3 running around Boundary Bay right now, not one time have they picked up one of these molting ducks. They just don't. That's not part of what they deal with. People thought they did because they see it where the wintering eagles and falcons have picked up these birds, and they see them out on buoys, floats, and navigation buoys. But it's not the breeding eagles that are doing this. It's not the breeding eagles. It's a different population of birds totally.
Okay, so we got, yeah.
Sometimes what we see in real life is a bit different than what we imagine.
Yeah, we've got some very good questions coming here. I'm quickly going to quote Amanda, and then I'll take Mandy too. So first Amanda here. David, in regards to your 450 nests in the Fraser Valley, how often do you visit all the nests that are accessible? And do you check them more often than others for certain reasons? Great question. How do you know?
Well, I don't get to all of them every year. And so, I mean, I wished I could. One of the challenges we have here is most of the Fraser Valley nests are in huge cottonwoods. In the wilderness parts of the coast, they're in conifer trees. But in the valley, the conifers have all been cut down, basically, a few along parks and so on. But most of them are in cottonwoods. And the challenge becomes, I can see the nests when the eagles come back in October, because the leaves are all off, and the leaves stay off the tree in October, November, December, January, February, March, and come into April, they're all going to grow their great curtain of leaves, and they're going to prohibit me seeing what these nests produce. I get
Okay, there you go.
so I get to see the nests and the birds all sitting on them, but then the trees grow all these wonderful leaves, and they deny me the opportunity to see the actual detail of what these nests produce. So I get to see some nests, and I've learned which ones I know I can go up a certain place and see through a little hole in the canopy, or some of them are in deciduous trees, and you can see across with the scope. But most nests become, unfortunately, inaccessible to viewing once the leaves come out. And so, sadly, I don't get the productivity on all these nests that I'd like to. Now, I just bought myself, I just bought myself a little drone. In fact, when we were landlocked in the hotel in Anchorage and up in Alaska here.
We were flying in the hotel room. I taught him how to fly a drone in the hotel room.
I got it out. The first time in my life I've ever flown a drone, and I did it in the hotel room. So I'm hoping to get better and find some more time to hone my skills down, because it will be a way of, if I can learn to fly up between the branches, it's going to be tricky, but the technology is getting better. Then maybe I'll be able to peek into these nests, because they don't mind these little tiny drones. That's the one thing we've learned about it. They just don't seem to be upset by little drones. They don't like big drones, and they don't like helicopters, but little drones just they sneer at them. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
And here the question from Mandy, which is a great one too. As Harriet, so the female, gets older, as like in humans, can they possibly be genetic issues for growth development, issues with future eggs? Great question again, right? So,
well, there certainly theoretically could be. Eagles, most birds, are what they call determinate layers. They lay a set number of clutches and a number of eggs in a clutch, but they also have, when they are born, every ova in their body already smaller and smaller. So they've got as many eggs in their body as they're going to have potentially that they're capable of laying over their lifetime. Now, is this number limiting ultimately the number that they might lay? Well, let's just put it this way. The first situation is it's very few eagles that live to 25 years of age. I mean, we know in captivity they can live to 50 or more, but that's got to be a big challenge for a wild bird to be physically capable of handling all those stresses throughout the different parts of the year and raising young. So I'm quite sure that it's normally not the limiting factor on the species. The limiting factor is how long do you live to keep producing the egg. You've probably got enough to produce to keep producing them while you're living.
Yeah, now we're getting a lot of questions because of drones. Of course, when we flew it, I just have to tell the funny story again in the hotel room, because we were actually going to fly from Anchorage to Dutch Harbor, and typically because all the bad weather comes actually near the Aleutian Islands, it originates from that. We couldn't fly that day. We had to wait a few days. So we were on one day confined to the hotel room, and that's where David took out his little drone, and I taught him how to fly. It was quite so. What you do is you have these propeller protectors. And at first he was bashing the walls quite a lot, but then eventually he got quite good, so he could fly through.
I'm not talking about your flying.
Come on. He could fly past the bathroom to the door without hitting anything and coming right back. And anyway, there's some questions here because people are, of course, concerned. And maybe we should also refer to Professor David Bird here, who is a very appropriate name, actually, who's an expert on drones, because people say, well, Mohammed's saying, well, eagles will attack drones, and that actually has happened in Australia and some other places. Yes, the wedge-tailed eagle has attacked a drone. It even attacked my drone once without me knowing. I was flying in Australia, didn't even know there wasn't, but something attacked my drone because it went down, and it's very likely to be a wedge-tailed eagle. But so the concerns aren't they going to scare the eagles or so? So what's your opinion there, David?
Well, I started life, almost started life at 15 as a pilot. So I've had a long relationship of wanting to share the air with eagles. And I learned very early on in dealing with eagles and all birds, but particularly eagles and airplanes, that fixed wing airplanes don't seem to have a negative relationship to most eagles. Rarely does an eagle ever attack a fixed wing airplane. I mean, it doesn't mean some haven't attacked them. It doesn't mean that some won't attack people. As you know, the pair of eagles that nest at Dutch Harbor above the post office, they attack people if they go toward their nest. So there are exceptions, but eagles generally don't attack fixed wing airplane, and they don't like and either massively and upsettingly avoid helicopters because they don't like them, or they attack them. And when I was doing way back in the 60s, one of my first surveys from a helicopter, because I couldn't get an eagle to get off the nest with my fixed wing airplane. I had a float plane, and I could not get the eagles to get off the nest. No matter how close I came, no matter what I did, I couldn't get them off the darn nest to count their eggs. So I got a friend of mine who had a helicopter. It was a Coast Guard helicopter. And as we got like 400 yards, 300, 200, by the time we were getting almost 100 yards apart, you could see the bird was already getting agitated. And within a few, we would slow down. And we got to where we learned that every eagle was a bit different. But if you got close to approaching about within 100 yards with a helicopter, the bird was going to stand up and then jump off the nest. Well, we learned that you just get so close, the bird stands up, you count the eggs, and you move away. So we learned how to never drive them off the nest. But I do know that they don't like helicopters. It's just
there you go.
Vibrations or the noise or the difference. They don't understand. They certainly don't seem to mind. And I had the Coast Guard guy I was with, when we had an eagle come between our blades. It came right down and it passed by the bubble. We were in a little Bell helicopter, and it went between the blades. It was coming straight down at us with its feet out, and that was it. That's when we terminated the studies, because we were so it didn't chop that bird in half, and it didn't chop us. It didn't disintegrate our little bubble either. So it was a great lesson, and many an eagle has brought down a helicopter. It's just they're pretty dangerous around helicopters. They could be a problem. And when we started doing, I'll tell a small story out of it. When we started 12 something years ago doing drone work, I wasn't happy with the drone work with the eagles. I did not like the response of the eagles to the drone. Fixed wing drones, they didn't mind. It was the same thing. It was like a miniature bird, yes. And they didn't seem to mind them, but they didn't like something about the vibration. So I've been really very, very concerned about flying drones in some of our survey work. And it wasn't until the last couple of years where we've got very small drones and we find out that, damn, the eagles don't seem to mind them. It's so insignificant, maybe, it's not a threat. And they don't make much of a vibration. There's that hum and vibration about a helicopter blades, boom, 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 boom. And that doesn't really happen in these little helicopters. Their little tiny blades are going so fast that they don't see them. And so I'm now looking forward to experimenting with these birds and keeping good track of it. Many people have already kept track of the reactions of small helicopters or small drones and eagles. And generally, other people's conclusions are the same as mine are at a preliminary stage. So it may well become a good tool. I don't see any point and people being encouraged to do it around a nest unless there's some kind of a study or purpose. I mean, I don't know that it's dangerous, but it just could be an annoyance. And
Okay, I got two more questions here, and then we'll slowly call it a day. I think it's just an amazing day. It's wonderful. So first from Karen, and then from to Amanda. So Karen is asking, through your research, when the eagles from Texas went to Canada, did they return back to Texas? Also, once this clutch fledges in July, do you think Harriet and M15 will come back to the nest in November? Well, that is very difficult with a 4 months vacation. So saying that, well, that's a great point. The vacation's much shorter. Are they going to come back and say, I need more vacation? And the first one, tell us a bit about the migration. So through your research, go ahead.
Migration is fascinating. The chap who oversaw the study was a graduate student by the name of Nick, I think it's Smith. I hardly forget his last name, I guess, but Nick, and he was at LSU, and he got 9 of these satellite trackers to go on the back that were left over from a pelican study when the big offshore oil rig went down. There was a lot of money because they nearly, with all the loose oil, nearly eliminated the pelicans, and he got 9. So to answer their first question, nobody knew what would happen, of course. And they put the 9 trackers on, and they put them all on in December. And by end of June, all 9 birds had crossed all of the United States, gone north, and all of them crossed into Canada. And they crossed from British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec. They went, and the birds, when they went north, flew back precisely the same routing. They went to the same little ponds and creeks that they went going north. They passed through these same ponds when they came south. Only one bird didn't make it back after the first year. That bird went up above the Arctic Circle and died. The next year, the 8 remaining did exactly the same thing. They crossed over the same ponds as they had done before. So it was kind of awesome. These birds had learned on their first trip a route, and they were following it. It was kind of incredible. Now, there have been other studies that suggested that the juveniles in particular seem to go different places every year. But the ones that we had, or not we, but Nick had covered, which I got his daily reports on my computer, those birds seem to take the same tracking year after year. So,
and just to the second question, I mean, maybe that's a session we should hold once, only talking about migration and tracking.
Let me suggest something else before you change the topic. I have been putting trackers on cell phone-based technology onto eagles that I've been catching here, and we've been tracking where they've been going into Alaska and so on. Now we're about to trap some birds locally at local nests, so that we put trackers on our own birds, and we find out where our birds are going north and where they're coming back. Where most of the ones that I caught down here during the winter were all northern breeders. They're this other population. That's why we really know there's this distinction, because all the birds that we were catching, they were all headed back north for the breeding season. Yeah, but. And your next question was?
Well, the next question was that, and then we come to Amanda's question. But first, the next question was particularly about the short holiday that Harriet and M15 are going to now have, because they have this double. Are they going to start at the same time or so on? But I think I know your answer. But anyway, go ahead, please.
Well, to be honest, I'm not quite certain about the migratory habits of that particular group of Florida eagles.
Okay.
Eagles everywhere do something a bit different. They've adapted to what their local food is and where food is going to be at certain seasons, and so they've learned to move over 100,000 years where to go at certain seasons. What this particular, they must know. I just don't know this pair. Are they there all year round? As somebody who's involved with the pair will know whether they're there all year round or they're not. I don't know that. I apologize.
Okay, well, we'll leave it at that. Well, I'll see if someone answers it in the chat. I'm sure they will. To Amanda quickly says, Drones would be helpful, and glad to hear eagles aren't disturbing them. David, of all the nests to choose from, how did you choose the location for your first ever eagle cam?
Oh, wonderful. Well, it's one of these kind of spontaneous stories. I was giving a talk over on Vancouver Island to a naturalist group, and they had their business meeting, and I was just about to stand up to give the talk, and the lady said, "Oh, this gentleman here, Mr. Dick Carrick,
Right,
has made a video on his television set of an eagle's nest where he has a camera in an eagle's nest, and he'd like to show 5 minutes of it. Could he go before you because he has to catch a ferry?" So he showed this thing. It was a mind blower. I'd never seen anything like this where there was a camera 3
Right.
feet from a nesting eagle. Well, I wanted to ask him questions after. He said, "I can't talk. I got to go drive 50 miles and catch 2 ferries. Otherwise, I don't get home." So a week later, I tracked him down. I went on the 2 ferries, the third from here, and met with him and saw what he had set up. And he and an old retired chap had set up a camera in an eagle's nest and brought it down and linked it to his television. And what he was doing was recording videos on his television. Well, I said, "Why don't you put that out on the web?" And he said, "Oh, no, there's enough problem getting it to work here. I don't want anything to do with that." And I said, "Well, could we do it?" And he goes, "If you want to do it, you do it." and so I phoned my techie guy up who was in Vancouver here. And I said, "Can we do that?" And he said, "Sure." I said, "Yeah, I detect your enthusiasm." I said, "What's it going to cost?" He says, "Oh, we could probably do it for a couple of $1,000." Well, I hate to tell you, it was over $100,000 later. We finally got that whole system going because it was very complicated to be the first to do something like this. So it was over on Hornby Island, and we got it going. The only thing was the eggs weren't going to hatch, and I realized they got to the same stage that this chick was at yesterday, and they knew what day the egg was laid, and so the day that the pip was supposed to happen, and we're looking at it, and there's no pip. This bird's beak is not broken through, and I said, "Oh my God, we've got all these viewers."
Oh my
And this
goodness.
chick is not going to happen. So I then took a 48-day, almost nonstop visit of eagle nests to figure out how to get a camera in another nest. And we did. And it was only 1 day after the chick should have hatched. It was kind of incredible. And then from then on, the world got to see the hatching and chicks at Sydney, and then following that, the Hornby Island nest where it started. So it was a kind of a totally spontaneous. Hadn't planned it. I was giving a lecture, and somebody showed me this video, and we simply turned it into a reality.
Amazing. By the way, I just heard from Lady Hawk. She writes, official hatch time, Florida time, so Eastern time, 6:48:48. That's the official time, which they could probably, well, you determine it at a certain moment, right? But it's to the second here, 6:48:48. So that's what they declared. That's very nice.
If she's there, maybe she could tell us. It's probably on their website. I just haven't looked at it. Was this a 36-day hatcher, or what was it? 35, 36?
I think it's more like 37, David.
37.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm not entirely sure. But that's what I think it was, right?
Yeah.
So and anyway, or maybe even longer. I'm not sure. I don't remember it, right? Or maybe 36 or 37. But anyway, let's see. There was one final remark, and now I've forgotten. Oh gosh, I got so much in my head. I've now forgotten what I wanted to say. Gosh, maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll come back. I had two things in my head, and I just don't remember. Yes, now I do remember. Amanda just wrote, "Thank you very much for the privilege to hear David speak." On that note, I wanted to say, well, I really wanted to invite you all to the
for dinner. For dinner? I mean, we don't have restaurants anymore. Are we going to Amanda's for dinner?
No, hopefully to the Fraser festival, the Eagle Festival, where I have actually done some live streaming. I don't know if it's going to take place this year with all the things. I don't know, or we don't know. We'll see. But it would be a wonderful occasion where you could really meet David live when he's on a boat tour and gives talks there. Maybe you want to just expand on the Fraser Valley Eagle Festival, David.
Oh, well, yeah. we have the world's greatest collection of eagles. I mean, we get 10, sometimes 15,000 eagles in a 3-4 mile section of the Harrison River every fall. So the festival happens on the third weekend of November, whatever date it is. It's the third Saturday and Sunday. And this year, we're changing it to being the third weekend, the fourth weekend, and then the first 2 weeks of December. So it's going to go on longer. It's going to be less focused on the one weekend so that we spread out the public over the small amount of places that they can stay.
Right.
It's about 50 miles from Vancouver. I mean, it's only an hour and a half, but it's a way out there. So I invite you all to come to our Fraser Valley Bald Eagle Festival. You just need to go to the website and you'll see all the details and when it's going to be. And there's a tour boat several tour boats that run up and down the river, and the Fraser River Safari Tours is the one I go out on all the time. And I get to go out on it so that I get to go and count the eagles because it's awesome. I mean, there's a part of the river on the far side of the east side of the shore of the Harrison, where in like 3 miles we've seen over 7,000 eagles in 3 miles. I mean, it's kind of, if you're interested in biological wonders, this has got to be it. If you're tipped by raptors, this is one of the great raptor areas of the entire world.
Yeah, Proud Cat Mama of 3 is just saying, David and Dr. Sasser, I have an active eagle nest here in upstate New York. Is there someone I could contact in my area to possibly set up a camera? So she's so excited about this.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, because I'm in Canada and I can't even come down and do that.
Unfortunately not, no.
I gave advice to the Pritchard net site when they were getting going, but I can't go down and do that kind of thing. So Pritchard, the group there, they'll put her in touch, or just look up naturalists in New York, because they've had cameras there.
That's right.
In Ohio and various other. There's all sorts of cameras across parts of the northern states. They'd love to have. I mean, the more cameras there are, the more people get involved with these incredible birds, and the more likely people are to save them. That's how I look at it. So I've always encouraged more and more nests, and I think it's quite wonderful as an educational tool.
By the way, you're doing something. I just see Pacific Northwest Kate is there. I had her once actually here in the studio. And she's got incredible dedication to wildlife. She's out there every day on Boundary Bay and so on. And I think, David, you've also engaged her for some eagle studies, right? So
yeah, well, she's helping me with that. She told me that she sent me an email this morning of a brand new nest, one that I have been buying any time, but they've just built it. And they built it since I was there the last time. So it's kind of marvelous.
Yes.
So I just got that data from Kate this morning.
Wonderful. Oh, wow, that's great. That's
down
great.
The road here, the native band, I gave a proposal 2 years ago to the First Nations about putting in an artificial nest in the top of this great Douglas fir, and be darned if 2 trees away from it, the eagles now haven't built their own nest. And I got that one this morning. I got to go and see the bird for the first time this morning in the nest. So, it's happening. And having people, like through these television programs, view and then follow up. We're all of us who are interested in education love to have that happen.
Okay, well, thank you very much, David, and thank you, everyone. I think this has been the most wonderful day. What a good way to start April in our crazy times. I would like to thank all of you for participating and all your questions, dedication, enthusiasm about wildlife, and that's also the way we conserve wildlife. It's wonderful to see this, and also to have the opportunity to have this channel as a photo to share with you the incredible knowledge that David Hancock has. It's very unique. So on that note, yeah, anything else you want to say, David?
It's about living 82 years. That's what it's
it's
about.
incredible.
You remember the odd thing and forget most of it, but you remember a few key things. That's
You remember a lot. You remember a lot. Anyway, so thank you for all of you, and enjoy these wonderful moments. By the way, David was talking about orcas. So the next guest is going to be an orca specialist from Norway, and David, who's got so much experience on orcas, is going to help interview her. It'll be absolutely incredible, I promise you. And I will announce that as soon as we arrange the date. So that's upcoming, and we'll have many more streams, right? So
yeah. I like the avian predators, and I always loved the orcas. I was involved in all the early captive orcas because I was an opportunity to have an intimate relationship with them, and I was quite involved with them. So this will be interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, then thank you to everyone on YouTube. I also see Lady Hawk says thank you very much to both of us. Love you both. That's very nice. Well, Lady Hawk, you do.
Lady Hawk, she makes a great contribution with her just flooding. No, not flooding, because that sounds like a bad thing. Making available all this material over and again to other people. That's wonderful, Lady Hawk. Wonderful.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, you make my life so much easier. I don't know what I would do without you. And if you haven't seen her YouTube channel, I'll quickly show it now. So those of you who don't know, I'm just going to see if I can quickly get it. Wait a second. YouTube, and it's Lady Hawk. Sorry, I'm doing all this live. Not Lady Gaga. Well, that has to come up, of course. Oh my God.
I thought that was her other name.
So that's her channel here. That is her channel. There you go. Lady Hawk. Oh, she's already got 36.2k subscribers. So that is an enormous educational channel. Absolutely wonderful. So go and visit that, and subscribe to her channel. As you can see, I've subscribed to her wonderful channel. You're getting close to Lady Gaga, okay, Lady Hawk? That's good. So anyway, on that note, thank you to everyone, and so I'll say goodbye to everyone on YouTube first.